Lots of players have heard about this rule, but let me share exactly why it is so important. Let's say you start the game and usually you push one of your central pawns forward exactly to occupy those central squares. Now what are they? They are these 4 central squares right in the middle of the board, and they have the greatest importance for you. For that reason, we either play pawn e4 or pawn d4. Let's say we go pawn d4, and your opponent just tries to develop his pieces, which seems to be fine as well. However, at the very same moment, he neglects the center, and therefore you can keep grabbing the center. Pawn e4. Let's say your opponent continues developing, and you keep grabbing the center. Now your opponent wants to bring up the knight, and then the castle, but you can already play pawn to e5. And at this point, you can already see how strong your position is, just because you occupy the center. First of all, your pawns themselves control a whole lot of squares on the board, but on top of that, thanks to this space advantage, your other pieces are also controlling lots of important lines and diagonals. And just based on the volume of errors that I've drawn here, you can see how great your domination already is, just within a couple moves of you occupying the center of the board. For example, what can black do in this particular case? If they move their knight all the way back to g8, well, they can't castle after that, and they kind of undevelop their knight, so it's probably not what they want. If they try to move it forward to e4, you can actually play f3 and notice that your pawns are taking away pretty much all the squares where this knight could possibly go to. Plus, your bishop is taking away this final square on g5, and therefore this knight is lost in the middle of the board. Here's another interesting example for you how you can seize the initiative early in the game. Let's say your opponent plays all the same standard opening moves. You go knight f6, potentially attacking this pawn on e4, and if white develops their knight to c3 in order to defend this pawn, instead of just developing your bishop somewhere, you can play knight takes e4. It is not a sacrifice, because after knight takes you go d5, and you're going to regain your piece on the next move at the same time. Objectively speaking, it doesn't give black anything that was just an exchange. But the upside is, once again, you start creating problems for white. You start creating some possibilities for him to go wrong, and in most cases, they will go wrong. The correct move here is bishop d3, which is less intuitive, giving away the knight. This great gift sacrifice wins the game, and it may seem like just a sudden tactical opportunity, but in reality you can see that, thanks to this strong center. First of all, we kicked off this knight from f3. If white's knight won f3 still, this sacrifice would never work. White would just capture with their knight. Secondly, you could develop your bishop to d6 on the first place to deliver this final blow on h2, while white could not put their bishop on d3 symmetrically because of your pawn control on this square, so your center actually plays a huge role here. Even after king to h2, we go knight g4 check. Once again, your knight could stand on f6, and so it could easily go forward after king to g1. Now your queen has a lot of freedom to go places to go and use different routes to attack the king, for example here. Queen h4 just wins the game because there is no defense. I think this is a little bit of an unusual idea. So here's the deal. We're attacking this bishop and this knight on e2. Now how would you react here, as black offense is the best defense, right? We aim to counterattack. So he played bishop b5. Initially it looks good. White goes rook b4. He's also counterattacking. Pusher. Pay 6. Looks like black is in control now. He's covering everything. Life's good, but white goes knight. d7 check. And that is quite an unusual way for white to stay in the game. Now normally black would not want to go back to the e-file under this rook. However, in this case he has to, because he can't go king g7. Strangely enough, that leads to this unusual checkmate in the endgame. Quite a sudden idea. Fischer didn't fall for this trap, of course, but he had to move the king back to the e-file where the knight is pinned, and after knight c5, black is facing yet another issue. Now white wants to grab this knight, this bishop, and then this knight on e2. You just ask yourself a different question instead of asking, how do I defend you? Ask yourself, Is there any attacking move that I can play here? And the beauty of that question, what I love about this, is that in many positions, there is just one or maybe two maximum theoretically possible attacking moves, such as in this position. And normally when you wish to attack, you need to focus your attention on opponent's half of the board and ask yourself, how can you advance there and attack something or capture something? The other move is pawn g4, and that is what Fischer played. Now that just counters this knight on f3, and in the game, white just moved the knight back. Now what would happen if white were to take one of these pieces? Well, guess what? Black would counter this knight and also attack the queen. If white were to capture right here, there is also a useful technique when you shelter your king with your opponent's pawn, and after that, you end up with this extra knight. The position remains to be complex, but nevertheless, we're up a knight. There is another super critical rule for you to neutralize like 50% of your mistakes, and it's really huge. So hear me out. If there is an opponent's piece on your side of the board, on your half of the board, you gotta neutralize it, and it is your primary aim now. If you let this rule really sink into your brain and really follow it, I guarantee your chest is gonna go up straight away like 200 points in one day. If you really truly follow this rule, because usually this piece is the source of all the blunders that you're gonna have down the road and all the troubles that you're gonna face down the road. Therefore, it is just prudent to neutralize it straight away. It is the only intruder that you have on your side of the board. Therefore, it is your primary aim to get rid of it. Push it back or trade it off. Do something to get rid of this problem. So here, how do we get rid of this queen? Well, you can play like this, but after some checks, the queen can stay right there. So I'd play queen e3 right here, just to offer the trade. You're up a knight, and when you're up material, it's worthwhile to trade material so that you neutralize all the threats and you can easily win in an endgame. And if he doesn't want that scenario, he'll have to drop the queen back, but now the goal is achieved. Now your position is much more secure, and in fact, you're just up a piece and you're quite close to being winning. You realize that, okay, if there's a single piece into his attack, then it's enough for me to bring just one piece from my side to balance the situation and to keep it, well defended for my side. So you can bring the queen or you can bring the rook, and just one piece is already enough to get the job done. So you don't have to retreat all the way back and start being very passive. No, just one piece is enough. But secondly, it also just gives you a guideline of what to do, how to defend. Well, you gotta bring more pieces into your defense and balance the quantity of attackers. So here, compared to these two options, I love the move. Rook d3 a little bit more because this is also an attacking move and you're not even retreating. You're actually moving your piece forward and kicking his queen away. Now from here, the rook is ready to attack the queen or maybe to move right here in the future if it's necessary. When beginners play this, they just misunderstand what to do in an opening, and it is just an incorrect. So after bishop g5, very often they'll actually follow up with one more mistake they're going to take on c3, which is going to reveal that they made the biggest blunder. They're not following this channel, and they don't know that to take is a mistake, because right here they opened up this semi-open file for your rook. They strengthened your center. They wasted 2 moves doing so and achieved nothing, which is great for you. Now here, if they also feel that this pin is annoying and they'll try to somehow get rid of this pin, then of course you just slide your bishop backwards and you still maintain the same pin. If they ever go g5, then it's even better for you because now this becomes a permanent weakness. It's getting really hard for them to cancel kingside in this game because now this kingside position is very weak. You can always play h4 in the future and undermine this pawn. If you play bishop g5 right here, then most of your opponents are going to see this pin and are going to neutralize with bishop e7, and they're doing perfectly fine. Now let's take it back. If, instead, right here, you start with playing knight to f3, the move which you were going to play anyway, most of your opponents are going to respond with bishop b4, thinking that this is a more active move which pins your knight. But now, bishop g5 is much more unpleasant for your opponent because now they do not have that bishop to come to e7 and to neutralize the... Well, this pin is actually not a problem. You're going to castle kingside within a few moves anyway, getting your king out of danger. Therefore, this bishop on b4 is going to be useless, and it's going to do nothing. So this move, I just feel like it has to be played. You got to put pawns in opposite color from your bishop. You want to take space. You want to make sure the knight can't go there? And the only reason to not do it is like, of course, there are some tactical ideas of black on the f-file. They just happen to not be very dangerous. In this position, okay, we had kind of a big transformation, but the black king got kind of kicked further from the center. Black's pawn over here is a bit weak, and you can either go here or here. Challenge the active rook, and white is completely fine. So if black wants to go down that route with g5, they can. If they don't, white will probably be playing h4. So white played rook d2, and again, it's not a big problem. But you see, finally this move happens, right? It's exactly the scenario we didn't really want to let happen because now our pawns are less mobile. Of course, white is still able to find counterplay, right? The idea like that, and white is fine. But still, guys, I would prefer to not get stuck with that pawn on f3. So this example is kind of like about seeing the problems down the line, right? Of course, your position is fine. It can take a lot, but there is a little bit of an issue with pawn structure. If you're black here, you know you're looking for check on a 1, followed by taking the pawn on a 4. You're looking for maybe queen coming here. Check. You're looking for queen. A 6 maneuvers down to c7, picking up this pawn. Both sides. In this case, it's a pretty even position. The computer gives it a 0.4 advantage for white, but both sides are going to be trying to promote. Whoever is quicker wins in this position. And likewise, if white can do a series of checks and then collect that pawn at the end of it, that's the type of stuff you want to be looking for. Long-range movements. Queen a5, queen h5, queen d1, if that. If that queen is not defending the d5 square. From a 5 queen e1 maybe dropping back, if the knight moves. There's so many long-range moves you want to keep your eyes out for them. So don't think about, whereas in a middle game you're trying to maneuver the queen maybe from, let's say, e5 to g5 or to h5 or little things like that, or to c5. Now, one more middle game example, this is a famous game between two former world champions. I think this was played in 1938, I believe, between Mikhail Botvinnik and Jose Capablanca. So two absolute legends of the game. If we just play through the game, I just want you guys to keep your eyes out on where the queens are throughout the game, and you'll see how the world champions sort of play the game where they, here's the opening. This is, again, d4, d5, d5 type of structure, Nimzo Indian defense, and here, look at the square black puts his queen on. Capablanca puts it on d7 in this case, but again, c7 probably blocks the option of that. Knight dropping back to c7 and then e6 and e7, that's also possible, but that takes the eye off the d5 square if white starts to trade things off. So dd7 is a good square. It has influence on these light squares. So for instance, if white wanted to put a knight there, the queen controls that f5 square. Not to go into too much depth. Just keep an eye on the queens. Hey, quick joke. Why did the cell phone get glasses? Because she lost all her contacts. Ha ha ha. Go like, share, and subscribe.